Welcome to Small Arms Solutions. We've had a lot of discussions over the last several years about the U.S. military upper receivers versus commercial, and particularly with FN. If you buy an FN rifle today, it's the same as the U.S. government M16A2. So we're going to address that today is the U.S. mil-spec rifles versus the commercial ones. The two upper receivers that we have here are both U.S. government rifle upper receivers for M16A2 rifles. We have both a Colt and an FN. Now, the main two rifles that you will see in the U.S. government are going to be Colt and FN. In fact, you're going to see more FNs than you are Colts. But there's a specific way these rifles have to be marked for them to be U.S. government guns. And then for as far as commercial, it's very different with FN. So we're going to jump right into this, and we're going to start looking at the Colt. The first thing we'll take a look at in the Colt is the way the barrels are marked. This is the way every single U.S. government M16A2 will be marked. C for Colt. MP, magnetic particle proof tested, which this basically means is the barrel is subjected to a 70,000 psi proof cartridge, and then it's magnetic particle inspected, which means they basically magnetize the part, and they have oil that goes on it with metal shavings. If there's any stress fractures, it will go to it. 5.56 NATO. Those of you who don't understand or don't know, there are two different 5.56s. You have standard 5.56, which was the M193 from the Vietnam era. Then you have the 5.56 NATO. The NATO cartridge is a 62 grain projectile, which was adopted by NATO. So that indicates that 1/7 indicates that the rifle has a 1 turn and 7-inch twist that's designed to stabilize the 62 grain full metal jacket with penetrator core and a tracer, particularly in the Arctic environment, which is why we have the 1 and 7. We have an unmarked front sight base. Now you're looking at the forging codes on here as well. Now you'll have different forging codes than MB. MB is Mueller brass. You can have some CH, CM, and whatnot. So there's several. You'll always have the C, which refers to a Colt forging. Now the upper receiver, of course, we have the fully adjustable rear sight. This particular one is the early forward assist. Now prior to the adoption of the lower receiver for the M16A2 that was reinforced, where you had additional material there, this forward assist being fully round was having a hard time because it was catching on the lower receiver. So in order not to have to waste all the forward assist that they had, they basically just cut down the sides so they would be able to cycle with the new lower receiver. So this is an early forward assist we have on here. As you'll see from the bolt carrier, you'll see a C on here. Now, all Colt bolt carriers will have a C on there as per mil spec as well. Now, as per mil spec, FN mark will be MPF, or magnetic particle proof testing. FNMI, so MPF. On the inside of the extractor, you'll also have the manufacturer's code on here, which is C. All Colt ones will have a C on here. Now, the FN barrel will have FNMI MP556 NATO 1/7. You'll also see that the MP looks a little bit different on the FN. The P on the Colt is basically right off the M, so you don't have two separate figures. Basically, it's one complete figure. The Colt will have the M and the P, with the P just coming off of the corner of the M, where here you have two separate characters. Now, all FN upper receivers will have an F on as a prefix, and it will have the regular forging code over on the side here. This is accurate forge, but this will have the F for the FN. Now, for the FN bolt carrier group, you will see an F instead of a C. Their code will be F, marked on the left side of the bolt carrier. We have an F for the extractor. This extractor here was not the original extractor that came with this M16A2 from FN. This is a replacement one, so you won't have any kind of a code that's in there. But originally, you would see an F mark on this. So the two main ones that we're going to have, obviously, will be FN and it will be Colt. Now, again, we talked about Capco, which was the replacement parts. We previously mentioned the Capco, or the replacement upper receivers that were used to modify firearms or to convert. Now, these particular ones are manufactured by a company called Capco. Now, what the U.S. government has always done for spare parts, they would use a manufacturer code of P. So instead of seeing C for Colt or FNMI for FN manufacturing, you would see a P. So it would be PMP 5.56 1/NATO. And you'll see the same thing on the upper receiver. You'll see a forging code instead of the C or the F, you would see a P. Now, for as far as the bolt carrier groups, when the Capco conversion kits were used, they used the original bolt carrier groups from the rifle that it was being converted. So, for instance, if you had a Model 601 with a chrome-plated bolt carrier group, you would have the chrome-plated bolt carrier group that was in there. Or you had an XM16E1, you would have a XM16E1 chrome bolt carrier group in there. Or if you had an M16A1, you would have the standard one, which is sort of ridiculous because if you had an early Air Force rifle, you wouldn't be able to use the forward assist. But that was the way that it was done. But those kits came with the upper receiver minus the bolt carrier group minus the charging handle. And then you had the fire control group, the burst mechanism, and then you had the pistol grip. So those are the main three that you will see for U.S. government. Now we're going to talk a little bit about FN. Now, the rifle that you see here, if you were to get an FN rifle, regardless of whether it was a flat-top M16A4 or an M16A2, will not be the same. It will not be marked the same way because it can't be. This upper receiver you see here, this is mil-spec off the technical data package that Colt basically owned, U.S. government owns now, and it's given to FN as a government contractor to manufacture off of those drawings for the U.S. government. They cannot use those drawings for commercial purposes. So that's why when you guys get your FN Collector Series, you don't see FNMI 5.561/7. That's why you don't see the F on the forging. That's why you don't see the F on the bolt carrier, the MPF on the bolt, or the F on the extractor. They can't do that. Those rifles are manufactured from different drawings. They are not the same. Now, for as far as the current production, now obviously M16A2 is out of production. Around 2016 is when the U.S. government made the switch over from using the factory codes to cage codes. You won't see that on M16A2s, but you will see that on M16A4s, NM4s, M4A1s, where now you'll see, instead of the FNMI or C, you'll see Colt's factory cage code, or FN's cage code, or whoever else is manufacturing it. On the upper receiver, instead of the C's and the F's, you're going to see the cage code. Even on the carriers, you may see the cage code now. The bolts I've yet to be seen. The bolts all I've seen have still had the original F's and C's on there. So this is basically how you tell the difference between U.S. government guns versus commercial guns. The U.S. government guns have a very unique and a very specific way they have to be marked, because that's the way that it's marked on the technical data package. Colt is the only company that you would ever be able to get a rifle from that has the exact same markings. If you were to, say, buy a Colt Sporter or a Colt AR-15, you're going to get the exact same barrel, CMP 5.561/7. You're going to have all the factory codes because they own it. So those of you who are looking to build exact clones, the Colt rifles are always the best way to go, because Colt always marked their guns the exact same way they did for the U.S. government. Because, for instance, this barrel, when it was manufactured at Colt, that could have gone on a Colt Sporter, a Colt AR-15A2, an export gun. It could have gone on a U.S. government gun. There's no differentiating between who they were going to. If it's this configuration, a U.S. government configuration barrel, this is the way that it's marked. So you would be able to purchase a Colt rifle, M4, a M16A4, and A2. They're all going to be U.S. government markings. Nobody else is able to do that. So I hope this clarifies sort of the way these guns are marked. And when you guys get a hold of these surplus upper receivers, you'll be able to look at the parts and you'll be able to understand what all the marks mean. Colt's a little bit more complicated because you have other marks under the handguards. You'll have date codes, you'll have chrome marks, you'll have paint dots that indicate different things. For instance, a white dot indicates U.S. government on a bolt. For instance, the yellow on a barrel basically means you're verifying that you have a gas porthole that was drilled because of previous issues that they had. So you'll have some other different things that go in there too. The barrels are marked a little bit different underneath to give additional information, which are not necessarily part of the TDP, so you won't necessarily see it in an FN or a Capco or anybody else who's making spare parts. But for the most part, anytime you see a U.S. government spare part in a barrel, you will see P. In the early days of the M16s, the earlier M16s, you'd see SAK for Seiko. Dimaco, you'll have a DevTech D. Dimaco, now you have a cage code. But they all follow the same patterns. So I hope you found this informative. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, please click like, please subscribe, even better, share. Thank you.